Now, John Yang on what we agree to when we click those I accept buttons signing up for email apps.
Judy, if you use email, chances are it's Google's Gmail. It has about 1.4 billion users. That's 2/3 of all active email users around the world. A year ago, Gmail said it stopped its practice of scanning users' inbox to personalize ads. But the Wall Street Journal reports that it still allows outside app developers to scan inboxes. Wall Street Journal tech reporter Douglas MacMillan broke that story and is now with us from San Francisco. Doug, thanks for joining us. Quickly give us an idea what kind of apps we're talking about and why do they want access to our emails?
Yeah, thanks, John. So Google says that Gmail apps make your email more useful. A few years ago, the company started opening up email and the data inside it to third-party software developers who are making apps like productivity tools that let you schedule an email to send later. There are travel planning apps, there are shopping apps. There's kind of an array of ways that let you kind of superpower your email. But as we found out in our reporting, the more kind of you are letting these developers access the data in your email, the more you are risking some of that personal data that is all over the inside of your email to fall into the wrong hands.
And are these computers scanning the emails or are these real people reading the emails?
Yeah, so that's one of the most surprising things we found in our reporting for this story was that in most cases, these are computers scanning these messages automatically. We talked to one company called ReturnPath that is hooked up to more than 2 million users and actively scanning their messages. Mostly that's computers scanning them, but in some cases we found in order to train those computers, they need to have human beings step in and actually manually review those messages. And in the case of this ReturnPath company, they were having employees manually step in and say this message is a commercial message and this message is a personal message. That process needs to be done by a person in order to make sure the computer can do it automatically later on.
And what protections are there against the people who are doing this using some of the information?
Yeah, so the protections here are the privacy policies and the terms of service for the companies who are doing this. I mean, first and foremost, that's Google and the privacy policy that they keep with their developers. Now, we talked to a lot of developers who say, even though that Google prohibits developers from doing things like storing data permanently, sharing your data with third parties, that Google doesn't really do much to audit a lot of the developers. They can run some checks and they can look to see if there are any extreme bad actors in their system, but they aren't actually going and visiting each of these companies who are obtaining this data. In many cases, these are small startups who don't have rigorous privacy practices in place like you would see at a big tech company like Google. So there's questions around, are these privacies being followed, and questions around, who are these companies who are getting this data at the end of the day?
And what's Google's response? What did they say when you went to them?
Google's general response is that it's up to users, and that when you click a button and say I give my permission for this developer to access my inbox, then you are signing your inbox over to them. But I think that answer is probably not going to carry weight. There's more and more attention on issues of privacy and more awareness of how tech giants have a real responsibility to users to help them make informed choices about their data. In this case, I feel like many of the users I talked to and many of the instances which we reported in this story today are examples of how users in some cases are not making informed choices and that companies like Google could be doing more to help them.
How does this compare to the case of Facebook and Cambridge Analytica? What happened in that case?
Yeah, so it's similar in the sense that both companies over the past decade have really tried to do what's called in Silicon Valley creating a platform. Microsoft Windows is a great example back in the 90s of building a software platform for other developers to build software on. And when you get all these apps going, you get a lot of users coming to you and you build ultimately a more valuable product. Apple iPhone also is successful in doing this with the App Store. Facebook, recently had some stumbles in opening up its software to outside developers, like we saw, like you mentioned with the Cambridge Analytica example. I think you're seeing Google now maybe is going to have second thoughts about its strategy of trying to turn Gmail into a platform, because people are starting to question whether or not email data is something that should be leaving the bounds and the containers of the Gmail service.
Douglas MacMillan of the Wall Street Journal, thanks for explaining this to us.
Thanks, John.